I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister blasts the Palestinian leader on social media. The United States is claiming that Israel should be more worried about ISIS, and it looks like our ancestors knew how to party based on a mysterious discovery made on the way to Jerusalem. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has just been rushed to the hospital after experiencing chest pains. Initial reports are suggesting that Olmert may have suffered a heart attack. The former Prime Minister is currently midway through a 27-month prison sentence for corruption and bribery in what has been described as one of Israel's biggest graft cases. On Sunday, the Prison Parole Board is set to announce whether or not the ex-premier will be granted an early release from prison. Much like his time in office, Olmert's time in prison has been full of controversy. Last week, police raided a publishing house under suspicion that Olmert had passed along uncensored copies of his memoirs to the publishing company. We'll be covering the story as it develops. The Israeli Prime Minister has taken to Twitter to attack Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and he's claiming that the Fatah leader is poisoning the minds of Palestinian youth. In a late-night series of tweets on Monday, Netanyahu accused Abbas of lying to the world about his attitude toward terrorism. Last week, Netanyahu pointed out that the Palestinian Authority named a public square after the terrorist who planned the 1974 Ma'alot massacre. The terror attack in northern Israel resulted in the deaths of 22 children. Additionally, Netanyahu says that after Friday's Jerusalem terror attack, Abbas's Fatah movement decorated the house of one of the killers with flags. Although the Palestinian Authority has not claimed responsibility for the Friday attacks, it has accused Israel of war crimes for the deaths of the terrorists. The Prime Minister's tweet storm came hours after U.S. President Donald Trump's peace envoy Jason Greenblatt arrived in Israel. Greenblatt and Trump's senior advisor Jared Kushner will be meeting with Netanyahu and other high-level Israeli and Palestinian officials this week. Israeli sources are saying that the Iranian missile strike on Deir ez-Zor was a flop, but Israel might have other things to worry about. According to a Syrian opposition activist who lives in Germany but is from the region, only 2 of the 7 Iranian missiles even made it to Syria, and only 1 hit its intended target. Reportedly, the strikes caused no casualties. Ehud Yaari, an Israeli analyst, says that if the Iranians were trying to signal to Israel and the Americans that their missiles are operational, the strike was a failure. Meanwhile, U.S. security honchos are challenging the Israeli consensus that ISIS had nothing to do with the Friday terror attacks in Jerusalem. While the attacks were claimed by Hamas and the PFLP, with a Hamas spokesman denying ISIS involvement, a New York Times reporter disagrees. Rukmini Kalimachi, who follows ISIS activities on the internet, says that the reaction in the West is that this is a talk of deranged people, and that one by one countries that have been called out have seen bloodshed on their soil. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the Friday stabbings and assaults around the old city of Jerusalem. Joining me today in the studio to discuss Iran's missile strike in Syria and what it means for Israel is Abi Hareven, an IDF colonel in the reserves and former head of the Israel Space Agency. Thank you so much for joining us.
You are welcome.
So let's talk about what took place with Iran's missile attack. How successful was it?
Look, it was the first time that Iran has launched missiles, tactical missiles, against a target in the Middle East. And at the beginning it was considered very successful, but later, as I saw in the media, only a small part of the missile have been successful.
So it was ultimately considered a failure, but at the same time we're seeing the United States, officials coming out from the United States saying that Israel should be more worried about ISIS and Iran.
Look, first of all, Israel should be worried about what's going around us, because we do not have too many friends around us. And Iran is, of course, although it's not very, very close to us, but it's also considered the very first enemy.
Now, do they have intercontinental ballistic missiles? Is this something that Israel should be concerned about?
Yes, they have, and they are continuing investing a lot of money and technology, and they have good technicians and engineers.
What is
And
Russia's involvement with this? Is Russia, supplying Iran with advanced missiles?
No, we think that North Korea, they are the most important source of this kind of missiles, and they are investing money in their own industry and in their own scientists, and they have good scientists, and we should be worried about their intentions.
Is there a fear that those missiles that Iran, is receiving and creating, could they end up in the hands of Hezbollah?
I think they've already sent to Hezbollah a part of their missile. I assume that they've not sent to them the last sophisticated missiles, but they are covering today. Hezbollah is covering all the Israeli territory, and we of course have to be worried. And we are preparing ourselves because, we are investing in our Arrow, in Iron Dome, David Slings. We are all the time investing, and we have the most sophisticated interceptors in the world, I can say.
Now, speaking of just, the threat of missiles and the missile capabilities of the enemies around Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and ISIS, what are their missile capabilities right now?
Look, at the beginning, they have only small rockets, mm-hmm. But meanwhile, they've acquired much more sophisticated missiles, and it's just a question of time when Iran will give Hezbollah more sophisticated missiles. We are doing all the efforts to prevent this kind of supplies, but of course, part of them will arrive, and for this, we prepared very good, sophisticated mm-hmm. interceptors in for different heights, starting with the Arrow 2, Arrow 3, David Slings, which proved itself as a very good system, Iron Dome, and we hope that we'll be able to prevent those attacks.
Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio.
You're welcome.
All right. Yesterday, a report came out in the Wall Street Journal saying that Israel is backing rebel groups on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that's not true. Netanyahu was visiting the Ziv Medical Center in the northern Israeli city of Sfat on Monday when he said, "We do not interfere in this terrible, bloody conflict. The only thing Israel does is provide humanitarian aid to young boys and girls," according to Netanyahu. And he says it's expensive, but Israel will continue to invest in it. More than 1,000 Syrian men, women, and children have been treated at the Ziv Medical Center, and many more have received care at an IDF field hospital on the Syrian border. The Prime Minister says that those treated by Israel once saw the country as an enemy, but now realize that Israel is a beacon of light in the region where all are treated equally. According to the Wall Street Journal report, Israel is providing around $5,000 a month to the Fursan al-Julan group in the Quneitra province of Syria and is supporting around 800 fighters in the area in total. A spokesman for Fursan al-Julan told the Journal that they wouldn't have survived without Israel's heroic assistance. According to data released by the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics, over the past year there has been a 70% rise in the construction of new Israeli housing units in the West Bank. Over that same time period, however, building within the borders of the Green Line has dropped by 2.5%, and these numbers are ringing ears. ILTV correspondent Aaron Porras joins me with more on the story. Aaron, we know that settlement construction has been a big issue, but what makes these statistics so upsetting?
First of all, it's the classic argument that settlements are an impediment to peace, so expanding upon them is certainly not helping the peace process. That being said, you also have a lot of Israelis who are living under a very, very high cost of living, and we have a housing crisis, a shortage of housing crisis. So, in fact, The Economist just recently reported that Israel has had the highest rise in cost of living on Earth in a decade.
Wow.
So, in addition to that,
that's not surprising to hear, living here on the ground.
It's really sadly not that surprising. Yeah, you're right. But, so the thing that's really upsetting everybody is that there's so much construction seemingly occurring, but it's servicing a population that is the minority and in an area that is very contested. So it's rubbing people the wrong way.
Well, let's check out your report.
Speaking to senior members of his Likud party, Prime Minister Netanyahu said Monday that, quote, "There was not and will not be a better government for settlement than our government. We build in all parts of the country. We do it with determination, methodically, and wisely," end quote. Well, that's apparently only half true, as the overwhelming majority of new construction has been in the West Bank. 2,758 West Bank housing units were started between April 2016 and March of this year, nearly double the number from the year before. Roughly 3,000 new settlement homes were approved just this month. NGO Peace Now calls the numbers worrisome and laments that 70% of the new housing starts were in areas outside the major settlement blocks. Therefore, Israel would have to evacuate them under any of the proposed peace agreements anyway. They also criticized the Netanyahu government of abandoning the periphery and playing favorites with the more extremist parties of the coalition. Now, though there isn't direct evidence of the prime minister intentionally ignoring any party over the others, he is under immense pressure from right-wing parties representing the settler movement. There are, after all, over 600,000 Israelis currently living in Area C of the West Bank. To complicate matters more, both President Donald Trump and most of the international community have repeatedly asked Prime Minister Netanyahu to hold off on settlement expansion, as it's often viewed as an impediment to peace. In fact, just yesterday, in a meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah, French President Emmanuel Macron said exactly that.
Nous avons évoqué, et nous allons continuer dans un instant également avec Sa Majesté, la question israélo-palestinienne. Nous sommes évidemment l'un et l'autre préoccupés par les violences sur le terrain, et je voudrais ici réitérer ma condamnation de l'attaque survenue vendredi dernier à Jérusalem, mais également par la poursuite de la colonisation qui menace la solution des deux États.
Back in the West Bank, NGO Breaking the Silence is also taking a stand against the expanding settlements and continued occupation, albeit in an interesting new way. They've started giving settlement tours, highlighting the fact that the settlement enterprise is just a symptom of bigger issues.
We want people to come here and to understand what is the occupation, not to hate the soldiers, not to blame the soldiers or the officers, because that's not the problem. The problem is the occupation, is the command given by our government to the IDF for the last 50 years.
In contrast to Breaking the Silence's campaign, Chevron spokesman Yishai Fleischer illustrated the conflict in a different light.
There's been a Jewish community in this town for the last 2,000 years with small breaks in the middle. And all we are doing here is asserting the rights of our people to live in this town. And why not? At the end of the day, Arabs and Jews are family, we're cousins, and there's absolutely no reason why we can't live together.
Despite his encouraging words of peace and cooperation, one thing remains certain. It's still anybody's guess how this complex issue will finally resolve.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party is under fire from the media after a report revealed that they financed advertisements on social media depicting the Zionist Union leader as a transvestite. During the election, a viral image on social media depicted Isaac Bougie Herzog in thick makeup with a bright pink wig and frilly bow with the word upturn in bold red text below his face, which was a reference to his campaign slogan. Not only did the Likud party reportedly finance this ad, they also allegedly paid for a satirical video which depicts the leaders of the Hezbollah and Hamas terror organizations, as well as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas endorsing Tzipi Livni. According to Israel's Channel 2 News, after the election, Likud reported the ads to the state comptroller's office and asked for their recognition as campaign expenditures. Herzog says that the story arouses disgust and demonstrates Netanyahu's distasteful nature. Israeli plans to build an egalitarian prayer space at the Western Wall might be going on hold, and ILTV correspondent Max Keisler is here with more. Max, what went wrong?
Well, basically, the rabbinate and the ultra-Orthodox parties in Netanyahu's coalition, they've been lobbying against this. They've got a lot of power, but ultimately I think this is going to make a big headache for Netanyahu.
Now, is he going to have coalition trouble as a result of this?
I don't see coalition trouble because I don't think anyone aside from the ultra-Orthodox parties really cares enough to really fight for this. But with American Jews who care a lot about gender equality at the Western Wall, there's a big potential for conflict. This Robinson's Arch site was already a compromise. They barely accepted it, and now it's gone, and I think there's a big potential for problems there. And while they don't vote in Israeli elections, it's obviously much better to keep them happy. But let's check out my report.
It's been almost a year and a half since the Israeli government approved Natan Sharansky's plan to create a new, egalitarian Western Wall prayer space. Most American Jews are used to praying in mixed settings, with women reading the Torah and wearing traditionally male prayer garments. However, since the Western Wall essentially functions as an Orthodox synagogue, worship at the site is separated by gender. The plan to construct an egalitarian site at the southern end of the Western Wall even received support from Naftali Bennett, leader of the religious Zionist Jewish Home Party, although not all his party members agreed. Bennett said it would help unify the Jewish people, and he hoped it would end clashes between female activists and traditional Jews at the holy site. However, the chief rabbinate is seeking an injunction against the mixed-gender plaza, and ultra-Orthodox parties in the government coalition are demanding the plans be canceled. If, as expected, the government suspends the project, we can expect vocal outcry from American Jewry.
The Jewish-American college student who was jailed and tortured by North Korea in 2016 has died in an American hospital, and his family says it's clear why. 22-year-old Otto Warmbier was arrested in January of 2016 for trying to steal a propaganda sign from a hotel during a visit to the country. He was originally slapped with a 15-year sentence of hard labor in the communist state, but his sentence was ultimately cut down to 2 years. Last week, Warmbier was released by the North Koreans in a comatose state. They claimed that he had contracted botulism and reacted badly to a sleeping pill, then falling into a coma. But American medical professionals don't believe a word of it. According to doctors, he showed signs of severe neurological damage that led to his persistent vegetative state. Warmbier's family believes that the North Koreans tortured him during his 17 months of captivity and that this led to his death. The University of Virginia student was an active member of the Jewish community there, according to the Hillel rabbi. He had gone on a birthright trip to Israel and even led an environmental seder for other students. As the Gaza Strip electricity crisis escalates, Hamas-linked media in the Gaza Strip says that Egypt is intervening by providing hundreds of tons of fuel a day. The Safa news agency is claiming that Egypt will truck in 500 tons of fuel through the Rafah border crossing every day, and it's just enough to bring Gaza's power station back online. According to an anonymous official, the trucks will be able to enter Gaza even when Egypt has closed the border crossing. It's unclear who will foot the bill for the cost of the fuel. Recently, Arab media reported that Egypt was offering Hamas electricity and more open borders in exchange for security cooperation on the border and the extradition of 17 terrorists wanted in Cairo. Did Hamas take this offer? It's unclear. In the past, Qatar has bought fuel for the plant, but there's no sign they're willing to intervene on Hamas's behalf, given that they're under siege-like conditions themselves. Yesterday, Israel started reducing electricity to the Gaza Strip following the Palestinian Authority's decision to only pay a portion of the region's electric bill. Police in Buenos Aires, Argentina have uncovered a treasure trove of Nazi artifacts, including Hitler's own magnifying glass. In a sleepy suburb just north of Buenos Aires, police have found a massive collection of Nazi artifacts. From a bust of Adolf Hitler to what may be the Nazi leader's own magnifying glass, the collection is both strange and frightening. Argentina was a refuge for high-ranking Nazi criminals after World War II, with many of them being transported to safety through Vatican-fostered rat lines from Europe to Latin America. In 1960, the Israeli Mossad captured Nazi criminal Adolf Eichmann near his home in Buenos Aires and transported him back to Israel for trial. Authorities believe that this collection may have belonged to a very high-ranking Nazi official. The current owner of the artifacts is not under arrest, but he is being investigated by a federal judge. The Jerusalem Biblical Zoo has just opened an aquarium in the capital, and even though the city doesn't exactly border the ocean, it's looking like the new attraction will be worth a trip. The 7,000 square meter aquarium just opened to the media yesterday, and the public will be able to start visiting in a few weeks. But it's more than just the first tanked aquarium in Israel, according to the director, Shai Doron.
Today we're opening the Israel Aquarium in Jerusalem, the first ever aquarium in Israel, and mainly the first ever aquarium in the Middle East. And it's a big occasion for us.
The aquarium features wildlife from all over the world, from the nearby Red Sea to waters halfway across the globe. With everything from clownfish to sharks and sea urchins, it'll be quite a change from the dry heat of a Jerusalem summer.
I hope that with opening the aquarium, we will promote the awareness, we will promote education with the young generation, but not only with the young generation, to do more to save the sea as an habitat.
It's certainly time for Israel to start celebrating aquatic wildlife since global warming has been destroying coral reefs across the globe. In fact, it looks like the last reef in the world are likely to be found in Israeli waters. But for more on that story, tune into tomorrow's show. All right, anyone who has ever worked in sales knows just how essential a good marketing campaign is to attract new customers. Well, one Israeli startup has been developing technology to help companies expand their client bases. Joining me in the studio today is Pini Yakuel, founder and CEO of Optimove. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
So tell us a little bit about Optimove. How does it work?
So essentially what Optimove does, we are a science-first marketing automation platform. And this means that we help brands to start meaningful conversations with their customers by using true data science.
Interesting. So tell us about that. Give us a real-world example.
For sure. So typically brands are really struggling to understand the true nature of their customers. And usually the way to understand customers is by looking into the data and using techniques like cluster analysis and predicting future value and things like that to detect true patterns of behavior of customers. So I'm going to know the next thing you're going to want as a consumer before you even know it, right?
So we're talking about some behavioral economics here.
Exactly. Behavioral economics together with data science. So we'll always talk about the match between art and science when talking about kind of like marketing. And in the new age, consumers do expect to get something different from brands. So we need to understand our consumers.
So what are some trends that you guys have noticed, working with customers on a daily basis?
Right. So essentially, I think it's a field that we're getting a lot better at, but still there's a lot of room to go. One trend is essentially the silos are kind of like dying, meaning that companies are still working in a traditional fashion in the fact that they have an email department and a mobile department and an e-commerce department, right? So everything needs to become one marketing studio where there's one customer, and when you talk to a customer over email but over the web, it's essentially the same person. So you need to consolidate and kind of like orchestrate this thing together in one place. So this is one thing that we solve for them. Another trend is, I would say, this hype around machine learning and AI. So, and again, this is something we're very strong at. It's kind of like the ability to go deep into the data to understand behavioral patterns and get to know your customers better.
Absolutely. Now, what kind of success have you guys been having so far?
So it's 130 people today, growing 100% a year. Offices I live in New York, so offices in New York, Tel Aviv, and London.
Good job. It seems like you guys have been having a lot of success. Well, it looks like we're out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much for coming in, and we can't wait to see what's next.
Thanks for having me.
Yet another incredible discovery has been made in Israel. It looks like someone was getting dressed up back in the day because archaeologists have just uncovered some Crusader-era jewelry in an Israeli archaeological site, and they're trying to figure out how it possibly got there. Volunteers digging at Titor Hill on the road to Jerusalem in Modi'in have found the inner courtyard of a Crusader fortress from the 12th century BCE. Avacham Tenler, director of the Israel Antiquities Authority, says they found ancient clay ovens, cooking jars, serving dishes, and a table in the ancient kitchen. But along with the olive pits, pulses, and animal bones, they found numerous pieces of jewelry in the kitchen too. Tenler theorizes that the Crusader-era cooks were not sufficiently careful with their jewelry. The volunteer who found most of the jewelry says the rings, bracelets, and cosmetic tools they've uncovered suggest that women played an active role in the Crusader fortress.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. A 900-year-old collection of women's jewelry has just been found in Israel, leading us to today's word, tachshit, which means a piece of jewelry, a trinket, or an adornment. We all like to adorn ourselves from time to time, whether it's with a crown on Halloween, a beautiful pearl necklace, or just with some really funky old earrings. But almost everyone likes to wear some sort of tachshit to express some personal flair. The great news for lovers of tachshitim or jewelry is that Israel is home to so many really talented takhshitanim, or jewelers. And we hope that everyone takes the time out of their next visit to the Holy Land to take a quick tour of the art districts across the country and find some beautiful takhshit to remind you of all of your travels. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight you can expect it to be partly cloudy with a low of 71 or 22 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect some clouds with a slight drop in temperatures and a high of 82 or 28 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.53 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.